All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the second to last Tower Light football pregame show of the year.
It's my senior day show.
Oh yeah, true.
Well, our senior day show.
We need to have like a banner that we should have had
Yeah.
a banner that you could have run through.
Yeah, that would have been. Where's the fanfare?
And we could have like invited your parents and everything. It would have been something. So William and Mary this weekend, Matt. An okay team to say the least.
Yeah.
They are currently 6-4. They are sixth in the CAA. Most recently, they've lost to New Hampshire, Villanova, and JMU, which has kind of gotten to where they are now. They lost to Virginia Tech at the very beginning of the season. And at one point, they were 4-1, with their only loss being to Virginia Tech. But they kind of played some easy teams at the beginning of the schedule. Most recently, William and Mary beat Elon, who Towson played for their homecoming.
Yes.
And Towson is coming off of a pretty substantial loss to Villanova.
Yeah, I will give them a little bit of credit. They hung in for about 2.5 quarters, I'd say. We scored right away, and it was like, wow, they might actually, stay with Villanova, a pretty good team, a top 10 team. And they had a 21-7 lead at half, but then we scored right after half, made it 21-14, and then it got away, and it was a 21-0 run. So it ended 42-14. It was closer for about 60% of the game. But the last 40% is probably something that you want to forget if you're a Towson fan.
Do you remember when Towson used to be ranked? That was the thing that happened.
Hey, they were ranked this season. They were. I don't know if that was...
They started out the season like ranked 7th, didn't they?
Yeah, and I don't know if they're 7th ranking caliber, but Rob Amber said it, without the injuries that they would be substantially better. So maybe if they didn't have the injuries, maybe they would be ranked in like the 20s or something. Maybe. Yeah, that's a big maybe.
You never know, I guess. So starting out with this William and Mary and Towson game, I guess the one thing that I'll just say is neither team is particularly exciting, in my opinion. Just looking at what they have on offense, this isn't going to be a game that you're going to tune in and expect to see like a combined 60 points scored or anything like that. William and Mary is 78th as a team in rushing yards per game. They do have a pretty good running back. His name is Mikhail Abdul Sabor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Sounds right.
But I think that's how it's pronounced. And he is 19th in rushing among the entire FCS. So individually he's a good rusher, but not necessarily a great rushing team. Darius Victor is 13th in rushing yards, in total rushing yards, and 17th in yards per game. So Darius is a little bit better, and Towson is just a better overall rushing team on their own. William and Mary, kind of relies on one guy to do all of their work in the rushing game. And the passing attack for William and Mary, there's not really much to write home about.
No. I mean, quarterback Sean Cluley has a 54.9 completion percentage, which isn't very good. I mean, 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions isn't bad. Seems like...
That's a good ratio, but not particularly great totals.
Yeah, it's like... I don't think he has a very significant, role in this offense in terms of scoring. This Villanova. I'm still stuck on the Villanova. This William and Mary offense is not going to be high-powered. It's not going to be Villanova. I would say it's probably going to be closer to like the Stony Brooks and the Mains. A little better than them, but it's definitely not upper echelon offense. Abdul Sabor and Victor, though, that's probably the most exciting matchup in this game. You have basically the two best running backs in the CAA in terms of yardage and rushing touchdowns. So maybe it'll just be a run-heavy game. It could be really quick if that happens. Abdul Sabor, 1,020 yards and 9 touchdowns. Darius Victor has 1,115 yards and 10 touchdowns. So they're pretty even, and it'll be an interesting matchup. In terms of, other high-profile offensive threats, I wouldn't say that this game is a game you want to watch for that. Both teams seem to be, like Munch said, organized around the running game. Wide receivers, none of them are catching a heavy load of passes, and both quarterbacks are, I would say, pretty average in what they've done so far this season. So, running backs, yes. The rest of the offense, maybe not as much to watch for.
Yeah, well, when you mentioned, the quarterbacks, Matt, you said maybe a little less than average. I think, it's a little less than average for Towson.
Yeah.
they're currently second to last in the FCS in passing yards per completion with only 8.95 yards per completion, and they're second only to Elon, who we made fun of before the homecoming game for having such a bad offense. So
Well,
I guess
now don't we
might
feel
be time
bad.
to eat crow or something like that.
Well, they did only have 111 passing yards against Villanova, which is...
Eat Phoenix, if you will.
Oh, Harry Potter and the Order of the Elon Phoenix, just throwing it out there. But yeah, they passed for 111 yards against a Villanova pass defense last week that wasn't very good in terms of the yards that they let up. They let up 300 the week before. So we only got 111 off of them, and that's a game that we were losing most of the game, so you would expect to pass. Connor was 13 for 27. That's not good. He threw 2 picks, obviously. That's not good. I still have my chart here. I'm gonna throw my chart out here. In terms of rushing and how many yards we allowed 214 rushing yards to Villanova, John Robertson and all them. And my chart says we win when we allow less than, say, like 130 or 140. Well, we obviously didn't do that. 214 is pretty high. And that needs to be fixed, obviously, going into this one. But Villanova's rush offense is heavy on Abdul Sabor, so he could find a way to get past our rush defense if we do what we did against Villanova. And our rushing yards, it was strong. We had like 180, but it seemed to be outweighed by the amount of rushing yards that we let up. So rushing defense, which I didn't think would be a problem, is something that we're going to need to focus on against a talented running back like Abdul Sabor. So that'll be something to look for. If we can stop the running game, maybe we can be successful, on defense, and then it'll be up to our offense to produce, which it obviously didn't against Villanova, but it was trending upwards before that against the Delaware and Elon game. So it'll be interesting to see which defense can shut down which offense first, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. And, in defense categories there, that's what I was going for. Had a total brain meltdown there. I've only been awake for about 45 minutes now, so bear with me. On defense, I had a stat about this. There we go. William & Mary is tied for 7th in the FCS in sacks and turnover margin as well. Towson's turnover margin is only +1 right now, which is positive, obviously, but not to the point where you're chalking it up as Towson's going to win the turnover battle every game. Right now, you would have to give that edge to William & Mary. Also, William & Mary is kind of spreading out their sacks. They have more defensive playmakers. They have 2 guys in the top 50 in the FCS in sacks, Mike Riley and Tyler Claytor, or Tyler the Claytor, something like that. Trying to go for the Tyler the Creator.
I got that.
And Ryan Dallaire basically does all the damage for Towson. So it's just a little bit more spread out, a little bit more consistent on defense. Basically, for Towson, if Ryan Dallaire doesn't have a good game, which he generally does every single time, but if he doesn't have a big game, then Towson could have a problem maybe generating pass rush. If there's a particular offensive lineman who shuts him down that day, it just is very Dallaire heavy, I suppose.
I would say Drew Tripko is another guy that could, inflict, I guess, like he could get a sack or 2 in a game like that. But other than those 2, I would say the threats haven't necessarily been there for Towson. But, I mean, having said that, Ryan Dallaire is...
He's 7th in the FCS in sacks on his own.
Had some NFL scouts there at practice this week for Ryan Dallaire. So, it could be another NFL sweepstakes. We could have another...
Terrence.
Well, he didn't win the Heisman. He won the...
Soon.
Yeah, soon.
He's going to go back to college and win the Heisman or something.
I can go back to college? Sorry. Matt Leinart. That was a great commercial, by the way. But
do you think that's what Grant Enders... Grant Enders should have been part of that commercial. Do you think my boy's chilling at Red Robin? Like, man, I wish I could go back to Towson.
Grant, wherever you are, man, let us know. If you're at Red Robin, we'll come hang out with you.
No, I can confirm he's at Red Robin.
He's at Red Robin. Go check out Grant Enders at Red Robin. But, like you were saying, our pass rush hasn't been as strong as you'd like it to be. At the start of the season, I thought that the pass rush would be pretty strong. But having Ryan Dallaire out there is, it's a positive thing. But for the William & Mary defense, last year they were one of the strongest defenses in the country. And we got out of there with like a 15-9 win in William & Mary, that was a huge win because they were a good team. Obviously, they lacked the offense to go with their defense last year. And now their defense they're allowing 22.4 points per game. That's probably a little above average for points, 145 rushing yards and 244 passing yards. So I would say they're a pretty average defense at this point compared to what they were last year, which was, I mean, at one point they were allowing single digits, I think. So they have definitely taken a step back. And obviously that's good for Towson. So I would say in terms of, advantages, it's a pretty even matchup, I would say. You have two defenses that are pretty average. They have some, good players on either side. And then offensives, running back heavy, and they haven't actually produced that much. I would maybe give the advantage to William and Mary on offense just based on the fact that they are able to do something, in the passing game. So it's going to be a pretty interesting game to watch because I don't think any team has a clear advantage like a lot of the games. Like Villanova, you knew Villanova had the clear advantage there. And against Elon, we had the advantage. But this one's it's a toss-up in terms of picking who has an advantage for sure.
Well, right now I think I would just lean William and Mary, and it's kind of one of those things where it's not they do something particularly better. It's like when you're voting in an election and you vote for the person who's not the other person.
No one ever does that. No way.
And it's just like I'm voting for William and Mary just because they're not Towson's passing attack. Connor Frazier is he has the 12th worst passing efficiency in the FCS, and the stat that I mentioned about the lowest yards per completion. If Towson gets behind by 10 points, 14 points in this game, I just don't know if I'm confident enough in their passing game to be able to throw to catch up or generate any big plays.
Yeah, and I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, you have this Villanova game last week that we were down in, and you'd expect Connor to throw, and I mean, he threw 27 passes, but he couldn't find his receivers, I guess. I didn't get the feed, I just see the stats, but he had 2 picks and was under 50% completion percentage. So if something like that happens where they go down early, which I have an interesting stat that goes with that. William and Mary outscoring their opponents 63-39 in the second quarter. So they own the second quarter this season. If something happens in the second quarter where they go down, this could create some problems for Towson. I don't think that their offense is made to come back. I think their offense is made one for a lead and probably one for a tie game or something where they need a score. But coming back is going to be a tough thing for Towson to do, which is why that second quarter, since William and Mary has owned it, is going to be really big. If you're a Towson fan, you want it to be a tie game, or you want Towson to have the lead going into halftime. I think that would make you feel pretty good. But if they're down by any more than a touchdown by halftime, it could be pretty tough for them to claw it back.
Mm-hmm. So with this being the last home game of the year, Matt, it's going to be senior day, obviously. So besides Ryan Dallaire, who we've already talked about, what seniors do you think, or players who could be leaving for one reason or another, maybe they enter the draft or whatever, what players do you think that Towson might miss the most next year?
Well, since I can't pick Ryan Dallaire.
We already talked about it, but
I think, like I mentioned, Drew Tripko was he was a pretty underrated guy since he was next to Ryan Dallaire. He was a pretty strong guy on our defensive line. You have Ty Smith, who obviously, is one of our strongest cornerbacks, and he played a huge part in the game or in the season last year. Spencer Wilkins is a guy that didn't put up as many stats as other receivers have coming through Towson, but I think he was a guy that was relatively consistent for the years that he played, and I think he was this season a relative safety net, I guess you could say, on the offense. So those guys are guys that played this huge part in what Towson did in these 3 years, and I talked to Rob, about this senior class it's kind of different than a lot of Towson senior classes, or at least in the past 20 years, in that they've been successful, maybe not this year, but the years previous, and it's kind of one of the first classes in a long time for this to happen. And he said every senior in that locker room is part of at least one conference title and a national championship run at any school in America. That's a heck of a career. He didn't say heck, but I don't curse. So it's kind of interesting to see what these guys have accomplished. But those guys that I mentioned, I think, were ones that played the biggest roles. I mean, there's plenty of other guys. I think there are 7 true, seniors that have to leave, and then 5 or 6 more that are foregoing possibly another year of eligibility to, just go out into the real world. So It's going to be about 12 or 13 guys, I think, honored. We weren't exact on that number, but there were some guys that played huge roles. It wasn't, last year it wasn't just Terrence. Ryan Blair made some. It was a lot of Terrence. Pete Athens, my man, also played a role. But now these guys definitely played a big role.
Yeah, and so finally, Matt, I guess I don't want to always talk about tailgating, but it definitely does worth bear repeating again. Yeah. Since they will, after they teased us last 2 weekends ago for the homecoming game, there is going to be the gathering at the football game on Saturday. Hopefully that'll help with attendance, and it sounds like it's going to be really cold, which could definitely be a problem because a lot of Towson people will show up poorly dressed, and then by halftime when the sun starts to go down and it gets a little bit colder.
You're telling me Towson fans leave when it's cold?
Well, I did.
Yeah.
I did for the homecoming game. It's too cold out there, man.
That's true. Well, I have the heat on in my apartment. If you don't believe that Towson fans won't come if it's cold, playoff game last year, Fordham, there was like no one there, and that was a playoff game, and it was cold. But yeah, there will definitely be less people because it's cold. But
the gathering being some food trucks to campus,
probably
a beer truck. So hopefully that'll help with attendance. Hopefully it definitely will encourage people to stay once they show up because there was actually a lot of people at the homecoming game to start out with. I thought student attendance for that game was good, but then as we wrote about for the cover story, nobody stayed.
Yeah, they just left.
Yeah.
It wasn't that, well, I guess it was kind of cold that day. It was windy and cold. I don't know. I mean, I was in the press box, so it was nice, 72 degrees and whatnot. But I will say, Rob Ambrose was excited about this gathering. I ask him every week now about tailgating because it's kind of an important thing. He says it's senior day, so you want to celebrate them. So he's kind of telling people, hey, you should come out. It's senior day. He said, from what I read, if I was a student, I'd be up there. So for what it's worth, Rob Ambrose, if he could go back in time and be 22 years old again, he'd be up there.
Where did Rob?
Towson University.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yes, and he...
Oh, yeah, that's right, because there was an old tower lighter who was his roommate.
Oh, I didn't know that. It's a Rob Ambrose. I wonder what he was like when he was 21 and 22 years old.
I would imagine just as aggressive.
You think?
Yeah. Like, I bet you in class, Rob was the person who always raised his hand for every question and always, wanted to answer it first. I'm sure that's what happened.
You think?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. I'll have to talk
I bet you he took
this.
principles of coaching, too.
Principles of coaching. Yeah, well, maybe he could teach the class now. If I could have Rob Ambrose as a teacher...
That would be amazing.
That would be pretty fun. Go ahead, Rob. Sign yourself up. You and Phil Albert can teach principles of coaching, and that would be awesome.
Or a film study course, because someone needs to teach me how to watch football film. So,
see, we're just asking you, okay? If you watch our podcast, I hope you do. I really do want to know what Rob was like in college. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah. So, my official prediction for this game, like I said, I'm going to give William and Mary the advantage, but I do think it'll be like a close game. So I want to go like William Mary 17, Towson 14, I think, in that ballpark.
Okay. Keys to the game. I would say our key to the game is stopping the William and Mary run game. I think it's possible to do. Obviously, you have a good running back in Abdul Sabor. He's going to get his carries and he'll probably get his yards. But if you can minimize what they can do and obviously succeed in our run game with Darius, I think we'll be able to control the game if that happens. If we can't, then we might be at the mercy of William and Mary controlling the game. So key to the game is, I think, stopping William and Mary's rush offense. And if we do that, I think we can be successful. Mm-hmm. So that is my key.
All right, well, thank you for watching, Towson. We only have one more left after this. They close out with Rhode Island, which should be a winnable game.
You would think.
You would think.
You would think.
But if Towson goes 1-1 in this stretch, my official prediction will be right for the entire season. And I made that prediction after the national championship game, I think.
You did, and I'll give you props for that. But I will say, if they win the next two, they get to 500, which looks a lot better than not 500, and is one game away from what I picked them to go this season. So, if you want to win 2 straight for me, that would be great.
All right, well, thank you so much for watching, as always, Towson, and we will talk to you next week for the final game.